Hello, everyone. My name is Marko Dukic, founder and CEO of Hensu. At Hensu, we have been designing, building, and managing technical solutions for financial services on the public cloud since 2015. Our focus is on collaboration, data, and applications. Welcome to our first webinar of a series, and as the remote working is very topical at the moment, and of course, hoping that you're all safe and well, we will be covering the Teams collaboration platform, part of what Microsoft calls the Microsoft Modern Workplace. We will be taking a brief intro tour of Teams and then covering a breadth of what it can do across the suite of tools within Microsoft 365 and beyond, making this far more than just a platform to collaborate during a global work from home, but something that can be leveraged across your business workflows in the future. This is the first installment of a series of Hensu webinars, so please stay tuned for the next dates and topics. If you're using the desktop or mobile application to follow this webinar, you may at any time pause, go back, and return to live. Feel free to ask questions at any time during the presentation. We are aiming to keep this webinar as interactive as possible. In case we can't get to all your questions, please put in at least your first name in the question when prompted, and we will follow up after the event. Recording is also turned on and will be available after the event. Next, I'd like to introduce Chris Chalmers, who is our Senior Solutions Architect and leads the Professional Services team of engineers. He will be presenting this webinar. Take away, Chris.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Chalmers. I've been with Hensu for just under 3 years now. Prior to starting with Hensu, I was mostly focused on the private cloud space. Since coming on board with Hensu, I've taken more the approach of AWS, Azure, Microsoft 365. We've been using really these suite of tools for a period of time now, and we thought it'd be good to showcase the features and functionality that are available. We've got 4 main topics to discuss really. We're going to cover Teams meetings, primarily the audio, video, chat functionality, and some additional options when you're working within meetings. We will give the overview and the architecture of Microsoft Teams groups and channels, mostly around integrating, working with files and applications, SharePoint mapping on Windows. Once we've given the overview, we'll dive a bit deeper into using the Teams groups and channels, focusing on collaboration, mostly around the chat functionality, channels, and modifying files across different applications. Finally, to wrap up, we will briefly touch on applications and plugins that are available on the Teams suite, both Microsoft native apps and plugins, but also third-party add-ons as well from external companies. So without further ado, I can begin sharing my screen. Teams. For the purpose of this demo, myself and Marco are working in remote desktop workspaces hosted in Azure. For myself, it will be Hensu Demo 1 and Marco is Hensu Demo 2, which you will commonly see through the chats and groups that we're showing. When you're working in remote desktop, there's a couple of limitations to be aware of. Depending on the underlying instance specification, you might not have video blur or remote control of screen shares available. You'll see the blur is set up on my video right now as I'm working local from my laptop rather than the remote desktop session. You should all see the remote desktop now with the Teams application full screen. Beginning on the left-hand side is your traditional navigation pane, which really is your central control to the other areas. You have activity, chats, Teams, calendar, calls, files, and underneath the 3 dots is your application areas. We'll touch on these throughout the webinar. First and foremost, for the Teams meeting section of it, we'll go to the calendar overview. You see the same physical layout as you would within your Outlook application, where you can see your working week as defined here. And two options you have available to schedule meetings. You can either do a meet now, which is an instantaneous meeting that you can pull people into, or if you close out of that, you can create a new meeting from the top right-hand side, which more mimics what you traditionally see within Outlook. If we were to populate these with fields, give it a title for the attendees. In this case, I will invite Marco as required. Choosing our time here, we're choosing not to repeat, just as you see in Outlook. For the location, for our purpose, we can just do it virtually. And typically you would have agenda items here as well. You see your scheduling assistant, as you would within Outlook. You can see your list of required attendees. If they are internal users, you see their free busy information, just as you would, so that you can avoid conflicts. You can add additional required attendees, and you can also add optional attendees as well. Since Marco's now invited, I can send it. You see instantly that the calendar invite is there. Marco would have also received an email notification, same as standard, and I can demonstrate that in Outlook as well. So Marco has accepted. If I browse to my Outlook, I see the same here. I can also double click and see the same details that I input on the previous page. If you were already in Outlook, you can also create Teams meetings from here in your top pane under your banners. If you were to do a new Teams meeting, it will automatically populate your Teams conference link, any numbers and IDs, and you can fill in the same fields as you had previously within the Teams application. Navigating back to Teams, if I now join the meeting, so you can either click on it directly to join, and then you have it in the right top corner. You can also, there's some additional functionality here. If you right click, you can edit, which will edit the options you configured. You can do a direct chat with participants, particularly useful if you're running 5–10 minutes late and you might be overrunning with another meeting. You can chat directly, let them know that you are, and they can choose whether to wait for you or reschedule. You can join online from here as well, or you can of course cancel. So if I go into the meeting, when you're first joining the meeting, you'll land on this splash screen. You have options of video and audio. Of course, for the purposes of this, my camera and audio is on my local, so these aren't available right now. Underneath your setup, if you have audio and video devices, they will appear here. You can really use anything that supports Windows. Myself, I use Bluetooth headsets, others use Apple AirPods, or you can use traditional wired headsets, mics as well. Once you land in the meeting screen, it will show the active participants. Myself is Hensu1, and at the bottom you have a navigation pane of your controls. If you hover away, it will disappear. If you hover in the rough vicinity, it reappears again. And probably the most common functionality you might use is under participants. Once you click the two people icon, the participants opens from the right-hand side as a pane. It shows you who is currently in the meeting, and it shows you others that are invited and their status, if they're accepted, declined, or tentative. As Marco just joins us now, you see he's now in the meeting and his icon also shows up. Other things to note is he's also on mute in the bottom left-hand side. If you forgot to add someone initially and you want to bring them in now, there's really 4 options that are available. I could, if it's an internal user, I could add myself to the meeting, which will display. If they are an external user, so for example, one of our clients in some cases, if we're federated to them, which means we allow their domain name to talk to us and they allow their domain to talk to them, then we can also type in their full email address. So in my example is one of my test domains, which show as a guest user. I don't have it allowed, but it would. If you have the Microsoft 365 phone system license, you can also dial users directly into the meeting. It will dial their phone, and if they accept and pick up the call, it will announce them that they're joining as an unannounced user. The fourth option, if you can't get them through Federation or dialing their number, you also have the option to copy the join information to your clipboard. If you were to navigate back to Outlook, you can create a new meeting. If you paste in, you will get the very familiar join link, conference number, conference IDs, and any other local numbers as well. If once all your participants are in the chat, you have the option of a meeting chat on the right-hand side. And this also gives a history of who's joined the meeting, any renames as well, and anyone that would leave the meeting as well. It also includes a history of any notes and whiteboard sessions as well, which we'll show shortly. If I was to post a message as an example, the most common one, can you hear me okay? That will show up to any participants that are in there. It can be useful if someone's having issues with their audio or video, that you can chat separately and you don't have to email them. Besides those two, you have additional options under here. Your show device settings are similar to what you see on the first splash screen of your audio video. You have optional meeting notes here as well. So if you are taking agenda items, this will load. And you can say, for example, agenda items, review progress report. Those are saved against the meeting entry, and you can revisit them afterwards once the meeting ends as well. Additionally, you can full screen if you want to, or in a preview right now is live captions. When you're doing audio or video, especially, if you're experiencing issues with your speakers, perhaps live captions enable a speech-to-text translation of whoever's speaking at the time, which means you could have this on in the background and every so often glance at the screen and just see what's being said. Similar to adding in participants on the pop-out pane on the right, you also have the keypad available, which you can type directly into. And there is recording functionality of any meeting. It will cover audio, video, and any screen shares that anyone does. When you start a screen recording, it will pop up a banner at the top to signify recordings on so that everyone's aware. And there is a disclaimer that you should let people know. The recordings are saved on a Microsoft backend service called Microsoft Stream. That once the meeting ends and all participants leave, it's automatically saved to there. From there, you can share it internal, external, download it, or directly play it back to review from there. Your final option when you're in the meeting is screen sharing functionality through here. When you begin the screen share, you can choose either your full screen desktop or specific windows that you might have open. If you're doing the desktop, it will do exactly that. Anything that you bring up will be visible. If you choose specific windows, it will only show that. If I select Outlook as an example, if I minimize slightly, you can see that there is a red outline around the window to signify that only this is shared to the meeting. Anything that I do outside of that is not then visible. This lets you control who can see what. If I stop the sharing, then it drops me back to the meeting. If I navigate back to the chat, your meeting history is saved as a chat on the left-hand side, even though you are still part of here. You get some additional options as well. You see the chat in a full screen window, you can directly upload files into the meeting. So I can upload from my computer. You have a financial sample. In this case, you get a progress update and also the confirmation that the file has been shared. If you refresh, it's then available. So this is now directly linked to the meeting. Your meeting notes are available, which I created earlier and now here to be shown. And one other helpful feature is the whiteboard. If you're doing any designs, drawings, or business workflows that you think could be illustrated better visually, you have this available, and you have a choice of different colors if you wish, and you can collaboratively draw to your heart's content as well. And
that's available.
This is all saved against the meeting.
That's available also for third parties that are part of the chat to also collaborate, including access to Microsoft Presence video conferencing type solutions where you have the full screen to collaborate on the whiteboard as a virtual whiteboard.
Yep. We do have a couple of clients that have got Surface PCs as well in their meeting rooms, which roam around, and this closely ties into the whiteboard. As you see, the meeting is still running in the background, and we have these available to use. If Marco were to switch on his video within the meeting, we will see him appear on the top left as well. There we go.
Yep. Can you see me now?
Yep, you can see Mini, and if you select the meeting, you can return to it as well, and you'll maximize into camera. At this point, I can leave the meeting and I can hand over to Marco to answer any questions you might have on the meeting topic, since he was on video.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So we do actually have a meeting, a question about the meetings and the federation to partner companies. So yes, that can be shared out. It's part of the Federation Trust. And it's not just FreeBSD, but you can actually share your full calendars out to third parties to the Federation. There is one other question around what recording functionality is available for both internal and external meetings, especially for compliance perspectives, and where is it stored? So all the recordings are stored within Microsoft Stream as part of the backend, and those are available to be shared internally within the company as part of the permissions, and the external sharing is then governed by the external federation sharing of internal content. All of that is stored within Microsoft as such, and can be then enforced with the retention policies that they apply. And how does this feed into archiving platforms like Global Relay? So Global Relay will pick up chats from Teams. It's an additional feature and pricing. There is a feature also within Mimecast for their ingestion of Microsoft Teams, but it is a separate plugin and separate pricing as well. A little bit more complex to set up, so our usual recommendation is to stick to Global Relay if that's already as part of your service. Chris, do you want to take on with the next section?
Sure, no problem. Thanks, Marco. Our next section is primarily focused on groups and chat functionality as opposed to meetings. On our left-hand side, we have, we're in the chats tab right now since we dropped out of the meeting. We can create individual chats with the pen at the top. I can search for, it's a demo. I can search for Marco. We can chat. Are you available for lunch? For example, this is a one-to-one chat. Using a similar method, you can create ad hoc group chats if I invite Marco again, but I simultaneously invite myself from my other account. I can demonstrate this as well, or both of you available for lunch. And that would send to both at this time. Both your individual chats and your group chats, you also have direct audio call ability. So you will do a group call without the need to create separate meetings. And you can also do the same with screen sharing as well. It will automatically create a meeting. You all jump into it if you pick up and share your screen. Similar to arranged meetings, you also have the other option to add people into ad hoc chats. On the right-hand side, if you click the individuals, you can view and add participants. Myself and the 2 demo accounts. I can add others here. I can, for example, add Christine Johnson, who is our head of business development. When adding her account, I have 3 options. I can not include any chat history, include history for past number of days for a period of time, or I could include all chat history. If you had someone who has recently joined the firm, they only need to know about the last week, then you can specify that here. If they're joining a new group, then you can include to show all chat history. Your chat also shows a log of any actions. Hence, demo 1 in my case has added Christine, and I also shared all the chat history. Christine then was either incorrectly added or decides to leave. She then leaves the chat, and it has the record of that as well, so that you don't think you're mentioning someone who's no longer there. And these are very much ad hoc groups and chats. When you get into the Teams tab, are more defined as permanent groups or more typically around departments. In our case, we've got Henshu Demo Finance and Henshu Demo Technology as 2 set groups of people. Each team is made up of owners and members. Owners have the ability to add and remove members from the group, whereas members are more contributors. They don't have that level of permissions. You can add members from your right-hand side if you simply type their name and click add. Members can also self-service requests as well. So if you have a new employee and they think they should be part of a group but they're not on their onboarding, they can browse the team, send in our request. The owners of the group will receive an email to approve or deny, or they will also see under here as well. Channels are quite fundamental to the Teams groups. They're often for topics. There's always a general channel within each team. This is default, created from inception, and can't be changed, modified, or removed. In our case, we've created additional channels which feed into topics. So we've got budgeting, expenses, PM, and profit and loss. You can choose to show the channels for yourself, and you can also choose to force show for members of the team as well. On the left-hand side, if you do have additional channels, it only shows 2 by normal. You can show more, or in my case, I've shown them permanently as well. We have a few options within Teams. Fairly generic is team picture, if you had any branding or team logos. Member permissions are exactly that. They'll restore channels, apps, tabs, connectors, etc. Guest permissions, which ties back into federation if you allow guests within the company, and they're also added into a group, what they have the ability to do. Mentions are very similar to Twitter mention with a hashtag. We'll come on to that further once we're actually chatting within channels. But this effectively lets you call out individuals or groups within the team. Fun stuff, obviously. We've got GIFs, stickers, and memes, which are very much part of the 21st century now. And we have tags as well for any filtering, searching within your wider organization of what the team belongs to. You have some analytics which can be useful if you have a large organization with a sprawl of groups. It might be helpful to see which ones are still in use. You can see periods of activity as well, current users, messages, apps, and any files that are residing within the SharePoint folder. You've got time periods and time windows as well, which you can specify. Each team also has ties into applications and plugins, which is part of the last topic of this webinar. They are mentioned here, but we'll cover them later on.
Thanks, Greg. We do have a question actually, which is a really relevant question when you have noisy participants. There is the functionality to mute everyone, and often that's a good way when there's that usual clash of echoes and multiple microphones in one room that creates that infinite echo. Mute everyone and then selectively unmute people to get it back to normal. Alternatively, you can mute individuals, and there is an indicator when individuals are speaking to show who is actually creating the noise, so you can jump to the right person and mute them from the team's audiovisual kind of participant panel. We have one more question around apps. We'll cover that in a bit when we get to the apps. Chris.
Okay. Following the overview, we can now dive into how you can best use the channels to collaborate across the team or who's part of the group. If we select the general channel as by default, you have your pane at the bottom. You can start new conversations here as well. So are we all working today? That will start a specific conversation. And if I were to navigate away back to my chats tab, I've asked the conversation, I've started it, and if Marco were to reply to that conversation, I would receive a notification in my activity bell and in the bottom right-hand corner. Which I see there. And I can respond to this directly as well. If I didn't start any new conversation and I'm chatting to individuals directly, if Marco were to create a new conversation separately within the team, I wouldn't by default get notified of that. There are settings afterwards that you can change. So if I happen to recheck the teams, this was bold to signify there's a new conversation, but I didn't have an activity or a pop-up. For each channel, you can configure notifications. This is quite often overlooked, I would say. Under here, you by default are not notified of new posts. You can either choose to do banner and feed or only in the feed. If it's a particularly noisy channel, which we've all got WhatsApp groups that are similar, you can switch off those as well. In our case, let's switch them on. And then if I were to reply point, in that case, since Marco started the conversation, he would receive the activity notification, and any further responses he made, I would get notified as well. As part of responses to these, you have a few different options. You can get a little bit fancy with formatting, just as you would in emails, to do tables, colors, etc. You also can attach files directly to thread conversations. In this case, if Marco asked about the presentation, instead of just pointing him to SharePoint, I could send a link or attach the presentation for him directly. You have emojis, GIFs, and of course, stickers. You can also, from this conversation, create an instant meeting as well. And whilst we're hovering over individual replies to the conversation, you can add reactions. There's some pre-built actions available. If, for example, I wanted to, instead of saying great to Marco's conversation, I could have simply said thumbs up, which is good. Or if it's really good he was working, I could change it to a love heart. If you have more individuals that create reactions, these add up and you can see them listed here. Can sometimes turn into a fun poll depending on the reaction. And if we take a look at the Files tab, each channel also has files and you can upload to here as well, similar to meetings and chats. If I upload the same financial sample data, confirmation of it here, uploaded a few seconds ago, and it has the history as well, that it was uploaded by me. We can, since channels are so integrated into SharePoint, SharePoint being the backend for Teams, just one thing to quickly show you. If I open up my File Explorer, in our case, we have Hentsu Limited, and we have the same Teams groups mapped as SharePoint folders to our Windows Explorer. For each SharePoint site, you have the same channels represent to an Explorer folder as well. If I look inside General, you'll see that my financial sample data was uploaded at the same time as this. If I were to create a new channel, for example, we could do loss makers. Our new channel appears in Teams, and we surely see it pop up within Windows Explorer as well. If you create folders within Windows Explorer, they don't create channels, so it is best to create them within the Teams application and then look in Windows Explorer. For working with files that are uploaded to Teams, if you were to browse the Files tab, you can open up the file directly within the Teams application rather than navigating out. It gives you a very similar view of as you would on your Office application. You still have the same options or very similar options available, but more in a condensed view here. If you accidentally clicked it or you do want the full functionality, you can open in the desktop app as shown here. You can also close out afterwards if you want to return to Teams. Marco has also joined us in here, as you can see. So since he's in the file, he's shown up and it shows me that his editing location is a particular cell. The purple on his logo signifies what he shows in the app as well. So you can see that he's making changes. It's highlighted which cell he's in, and we're both collaborating on the same file simultaneously.
Yep, just on that point, we do have a few questions coming up. So there is a previous question about integration between Teams channels and Outlook, and Teams, the actual channel is not part of Outlook, so the group level will see the team within Teams, and any emails sent to the team will appear as Outlook conversations. However, chats will not be visible in Outlook, and channels within Teams are not available in Outlook itself. And on another question, can you manage permissions on the channel level? So the channel currently takes the permissions from the group, and whereas you can modify things like moderation, the actual granular permissioning of the channel is a feature that's coming up shortly from Microsoft. It's not yet available as separate to the overall group level. And question around the collaboration and document. So the whole point of the backend to SharePoint is to allow collaboration, and having two individuals editing the same content is the whole point of it. But Microsoft does put in ways to mitigate any risks around it, like seeing who's editing which field, seeing the versioning and individual changes in each version, and obviously the rollbacks that you can then carry on. There are also some conflict management features as part of it as well. Chris, back to you.
Thanks, Marco. Our last but not least, the final topic section that we wanted to touch on is applications and plugins. As mentioned before, there's a few built-in Microsoft native, and there's additional from third-party vendors that are available. We'll cover this at a high level, but there will be some follow-up webinars to look into these and how to best position them for your way of working, how they probably best fit into funds, and how you can make use of them to really streamline your workflows. On the left-hand side, you can find the available applications from the free docs. If you are to select more applications, it opens as if you're in the App Store. You have a few recommended out the box, top picks. And on your left-hand side, you can sort by categories as well. A few that we find worth mentioning, or that come up most frequently, are Microsoft Planner, which helps from a project management perspective. It's very similar to Kanban boards in that you have left to right progression. You can have to-do tasks in progress and then close tasks so that you can track teams' progress. You also have Power BI, which we are personally making use of as well. It's very good data visualization, analytics, dashboards, and reporting. It can really take information from any source available, nicely integrated into Microsoft services, but we've got instances of third-party applications as well that it can feed into. Power Apps are another good one worth mentioning. They're more focused at developer tools, and you can create apps that connect to different Microsoft services or third-party services as well to help with your workflows. If you're doing repetitive tasks on a day-to-day basis that are becoming menial, you can automate them that way as well. That closely takes us into what used to be called Microsoft Flow, is now Power Automate. A lot of the marketing material is still referencing Flow, so for the purposes of this, we'll probably keep the same. Flow is quite user-friendly. It's a drag-and-drop logical flow, as the name suggests, where you can tie into your favorite apps and services. Marco has more of a hands-on demo that's relevant to us as well, that we can show the benefits there. So I will hand over to him.
Thanks, Chris. Just to point out, these applications and connections that are available in Teams come both from Microsoft, from third parties, but you can also develop your own. So despite there being 10,000 or so applications and connectors, you can develop your own in-house custom ones to add to what you may need specifically. Just as a quick demo, there is a small chatbot that we have as part of our demo and how we work with Flow. This basically queries a chatbot behind the scenes. It does take a minute or so to warm up when it's first queried, but it goes off and pulls data from a backend spreadsheet. The other instances and examples where we've kind of deployed this is, for example, in this case, where we have developers working on code and applications, and this channel is hooked into the backend source code repository, which feeds the updates and shares information about who's working on what and pushes out to production. Similarly, with collaboration, especially with dispersed teams, one of the big uses of that, we've got this live streams channel where teams that are working on a particular project or incident, they can get together, host live streams. They're available for anyone to drop in, drop out as needed, but also for historical review and going back in time to previous work. And as a final example, this is integrating with third-party security advisories that we feed into a channel that helps us aggregate any important notices. Obviously, all this goes into monitoring as well, but as a more visual and interactive experience, this allows the team to highlight, chat, collaborate on these feeds that come from external third parties. Just as a kind of highlight, these will be covered in far more depth at a later time, because there is a lot more to it as part of the apps and integration with the Teams channel. So that brings us to a close. Feel free to put in any additional questions in the Q&A. This will be available as a recording, as mentioned before, and we'll be providing links out to where you can access it again. Feel free to reach out to us, email hello@hensu. We can take any further questions or even line up some deeper dives with any one of our solutions architects if needed. Thank you very much for attending.